Hello, I'm Drake. Welcome to Working Dragon Mystic, where we talk about real metaphysical and occult knowledge so that you can manifest real and tangible results and change in your life. This week we're going to be discussing pacts. What are they? How do they work? Should you use them? And if you do, what would you use them for? Alright, so let's get into it. Okay, this week we're going to be discussing pacts. And right off the bat, out of the gate, I want to clear up one thing. Pacts with entities, no matter what the entity is, whether it's a demon, an angel, a god, it doesn't matter. Pacts are never required for any form of magic or practice or any reason to work with an entity. Okay? They're not required. They are strictly an optional element that you can add to your practice or to your magic. That said, what is a pact? Put simply, a pact is an agreement or contract between you and the entity you are choosing to work with. You're never forced into a pact, ever. In fact, the pact can even be made between you and yourself. A pact at its simplest core is you are agreeing to give X in exchange for the entity to help you with or give you Y. So exactly what X and Y is completely infinitely changeable based on the person and the entity you are working with. Now, anytime you are making a pact, it's highly recommended that you find an entity that aligns with the goal that you are seeking. That way it's highly more likely that you will receive what it is you're asking for. Now, it's actually not uncommon for people to approach an entity with the interest of making a pact and actually have the entity say no, they don't want to make a pact with them. And when that happens, it happens for one of two reasons mainly. The most common reason is it's not that entity's area of expertise. They don't want to promise you something that they aren't going to be able to deliver as well as you would like. So make sure you are working with an entity that would be in that field of expertise. And we'll give a few examples later. The second reason is the entity honestly doesn't expect you to uphold your end. And this is a contract, it is a deal, it is an agreement, and you will be expected to uphold your end. Whatever it is, you have to uphold your end. Another thing I always tell my students when it comes to pacts is be specific. A lot of people say, well, demons or entities, they're really tricksy. They'll manipulate and twist what you ask for. Kind of the monkey paw scenario. You may get your money, but everyone in your family dies to get it. Well, if you're very specific, you don't really have to worry about that. So if you do know you're wanting money, but you know you want it to come from a promotion, an increase in your career, maybe a new job, maybe even a very specific position at a new company. Put those things in the pact. Make sure that those are detailed out. One of my teachers joked around that this is the time where you become a contract lawyer. Not because pacts are dangerous, but because that's the easiest way to ensure you get what you want. Okay, we talked about when you make a pact, you offer something. You're giving something in exchange. And honestly, if you think about that, we do this all the time when we go to the store. You want a carton of eggs, you exchange money. You trade X for Y. It's exactly what you're doing with a pact. And that's the reason I've never had any issues with them when people choose to use them, if done right, because it's the same thing as a transaction at the store. Once you minus the religious dogma and step away from all that. So what are some things that are common and acceptable to give in a pact? Honestly, the most common is probably blood. Now, when I say blood, let's get this clear. We're not talking animal sacrifice. We're not talking about killing anything, ever. Most people, when they make a pact and they use blood, they will use a small disposable diabetic lancet to just prick their thumb real quick offer 1 or 2 drops of blood to whatever entity it is. And that's it. That's all they give. And that's all they ever have to give. Done deal. Now, other options, if you are queasy about pricking your finger and all that, and believe me, I get it. And also, depending on your housing situations, that could look weird if you get caught. Other things are food, water, alcohol. All these things that you would give as a general offering are perfect examples of something you can give in exchange for a pact. I once actually done a pact with Odin, and I actually offered him an entire bottle of mead in exchange for the pact. And he accepted it, and honestly, I think that may have been one of my better pacts with any deity that I've made. But a simple bottle of mead, that's no big deal. Granted, if you have a hard time finding it where you live, that might be an issue. I make my own, but you could easily give a bottle of wine or even a bottle of beer, just as an example. Another example of what you can give in a pact, and this is actually one that I think this is the one I gravitate toward the most whenever I'm actually making a pact, and that's an agreement to listen to them, learn from them, and take time to be taught by them. So you're essentially trading your time and your focus for their teachings. And anytime I do evocation, this is largely what I'm doing anyways. So I find this type of pact is really valuable to me. Though these types of pacts may not go the direction you expect. An example is I did do a year-long pact with Azazel once. And that pact was set up very specifically. I was to listen to him, I was to follow his instructions, and to basically apply myself to a series of teachings that he would lay out. Now, naturally, I thought the whole time I'd be working directly with him. And I'd worked with him a lot over the previous year. So I was really interested to see what he had to show me. To my surprise, after we had made the pact, he actually sent me to work with Odin, Freya, and Hel, as well as the other Norse gods, and to walk and astral travel the 9 realms. So I spent an entire year focusing on Norse magic because of the pact I made with Azazel, and what he wanted me to learn would be found over here, instead actually taking my lessons from these entities. So that was a big curveball, but I'll be honest, I enjoyed it. That year was an absolute blessing. The stuff I learned are irreplaceable. Absolutely one of the best pathworking years of my life. Now, the one that probably scares people the most is offering or promising to do a service for the entity. Now, this will never be something illegal or harmful. It won't. If someone tells you it is, turn around, they're a snake oil salesman, walk away. No, this will be something like, again, they may ask you to maybe say a prayer or a ritual nightly for a month or a week. They may ask you to start a blog. They may ask you to reach out and help someone. I don't really do these that often because, again, like I said, I tend to prefer the ones where I'm learning, or honestly, I have no problem with using lancets to poke my finger, so that's easy too. But when I have done this, it usually ends up in volunteer work, soup kitchens, shelters, those kinds of things. I've never had any of these ever turn out wonky for me in any way. So yeah, this is totally an option, and if you do a lot of volunteering, this might be an option you want to go. Just make sure before you agree to it, you ask them what it is that you will be doing. That's what it comes down to. Again, it's a contract. You both have to agree to the terms before either of you sign it. So you don't have to worry about getting tricked into something. If they tell you to volunteer at an animal shelter and you're terrified of animals, that might not be the best course of action for you. But then again, it might challenge you to overcome your fear, and you have to decide for yourself whether or not that's worth it, or whether you want a different option of what you can do for them in exchange. There are primarily two types of pacts with entities that you'll run into. And that is a pact for gains or presented opportunities. In this pact, you're giving whatever it is that you're giving in exchange for them to give you something that you will gain, whether it be money, whether it be a new job, maybe it's a new love in your life, career advancement, doesn't matter, new car, whatever it is that you're looking for. They're going to be giving this to you, but you're also going to be giving what it is you asked for. In the case of opportunities, they're going to be opening doors for you left and right, and they're also going to be working to make sure you see these opportunities instead of just walking blindly by them. Now, this differs largely from spell work in the fact that a lot of spells I've noticed will open the doors, but a lot of people walk by not realizing that door was opened and that the manifestation from their spell is right in front of them if they just reach up and take it. So in that case, I do find pact work to be a little handy because you do always have that little partner at your side being like, hey, the door's open, go get it. Now, the second one is you give what you're giving in exchange for knowledge, wisdom, teachings, educational gnosis of some kind along that lines. And this is honestly where you're going to spend most of your time working with the entity, talking with the entity. They're going to give you likely spells and rituals that you can utilize in your practice. They're going to show you insights, ways to look at problems and things in your life that maybe you haven't that maybe you haven't considered before. And this really helps to open up doors and help you really change the way your life is going and manifest what it is you want in your life. Now, those are the two main types of pacts. Now, there is what some people would consider a third pact, though honestly the third pact is really just a variation of the other two. Because in the third pact, instead of an outside entity, again, you're making the pact with yourself. So this is just really kind of inspelling your own subconscious to drive you and commit you to your goal, whether it be to gain something or to learn something. But I do understand it does differ and the outcomes can differ drastically. So I do see why some people list it as a secondary pact, though I've never really gone the route of pacting with myself. If I set my mind to something, I've never had an issue with just doubling down and getting it done. But for those who do, I can see how this would be a very viable option to, as my dad used to say, light a fire under their butt and get them in motion. Now again, like I said, you must be a willing participant in a pact. At no point do you have to go through it with a pact. You don't have to do pacts for any reason. And even if the contract is completely drawn up, you've actually gone through the whole ritual process. If at the very end you decide you don't want to do it, you don't have to. That's simple. Now the biggest kicker is, once you have gone through with it, it is a contract. And just like any other contract, whether it be a bill collector, a bank, it doesn't matter. You may find it hard to get out of a contract, but honestly, pacts are easier to get out of than bill collectors. Because a pact, you promised X for Y. So let's say I offered up a bottle of mead for, let's say, a better job. And then I decided, well, I don't want that job after all. Okay, so I don't want to give up my bottle of mead. Well, you can summon up the entity you're working with again and tell them the situation, and they may be okay with it. In my case, I actually prefer to summon them up, tell them, you know what, I've decided I don't want said job, but I'll still offer them the mead anyways, because they were willing to help me. And I just find that as a proper courtesy from my point of view. In the case of, like the diabetic lancets we mentioned, a couple drops of blood ain't going to cost me nothing one way or the other, so again, wouldn't mind there. Now, if you're doing a month-long prayer process or something, or dedications or devotions to these entities, well, they may just look at it and be like, well, up until now you've done your devotions, and that's fine. They may ask you to finish them, and you may not have to finish them. It's just Again, that depends on how that conversation would go. Most of the time, and I'll be honest, I've never seen it where in that situation they're like, no, you have to finish out the month. It's usually like, well, we appreciate what you've done up until now, and no problems. We're done. Thank you. And honestly, they're never even raw or salty about it, because you dealt with them with respect and honor. You was open with them and direct with them about what had happened. At the time of the pact, this is what you wanted. However, something has changed and you're now here. And they're totally okay with that. I've never ran into a situation in 15 years of my personal practice that I've personally ran into it. And I've talked to well over 200 different practitioners who do pacts, and none of them have ran into that either. So I don't really foresee it being a problem, but there's always two sides to every contract. Remember that. It doesn't matter if you're buying a car or what. Both sides are giving something, and both sides stand to gain something. No one's trying to trick or cheat anyone. It's just that's how the contract's set up. So if you were to back out of a sales deal or something, you may have to pay a minor penalty. So you may have to still cover, like if you're buying a house, you might still have to cover a portion of the commission, or at least the time that the realtor invested into the process. You may have the same situation with a pact. But again, it won't be anything drastic or anything. Using our mead offering ideal, they may not take an entire bottle of mead. They may just ask for some offering of any kind, from an apple to food to a shot of mead or even a glass of mead. They'll take a minor offering just for their time. And honestly, that's how I found that in those general circumstances how it goes. Now, with all that said, how would a pact manifest? Well, that largely depends on what you're asking for, because with a pact you can ask for some pretty lofty things. And if it's a long-term pact, which are actually the ones I prefer, honestly, unless it's long-term, I don't really get into pact work, because a month or less I can accomplish with evocation like that. So, or even candle magic. So the added work of going to a pact is pointless. I don't usually do pact work unless I'm looking at 6 months to a year. And because of that, when I do make a pact, I have a list of things that I'm seeking to accomplish. And it's really interesting, because every few months I'll come back to that list and I'll be talking with the deity as we're going over it. And you'll see that you'll start checking things off that list. During the year I worked with Azazel, I had probably 20 items on the list for a year-long pact. And 5 months in, I think all but 3 things on the list were checked off. And all 3 of those things were already showing fruition. And sure enough, by the end of the year, everything on the list could have easily been checked off, with the exception of one item. And the interesting part about that one item was it was manifesting exactly how I had worded it. And that was my fault, because in one request I actually stated 2 things. And the second part of it was, I want this to happen and this to happen in the quickest route possible. When you tie the 2 together, you end up ironically making the first thing take much longer than it originally would, because in the process of accomplishing that first thing, you're staging and setting up a better situation for you to reach the second thing quicker. So that was totally my fault, and I didn't think that through. That said, Azazel was allowing me to make adjustments, and there was no issues later once we realized what had happened. And that particular pact was actually set up so that my part of it was a year-long focus with him. However, he would continue to work even past that year to accomplish what I was seeking. So luckily, because of that little catch-22 on his end, I didn't screw myself because of my mistake with those 2 being tied together. So I recommend that when you do make a pact, you list off everything individually instead of tying them together in a chain of events. Because individually they do tend to manifest a lot quicker and easier. Now I know this video is already running a little long because pacts are a huge topic to cover, but I have been getting a lot of requests for this video, so I wanted to do it. So real quick, let's talk about actually what the process would be for making a pact, at least in summary. I may have to do a second video later on to detail the process if y'all want, so let me know in the comments below. Alright, so the first thing you need to do when making a pact is you have to know what you want. That's the first thing. You have to actually know what you want. You have to have that decision made. Whether you're looking for your soulmate, whether you're looking for a better job, you actually have to have a goal in mind. The next step is to decide what it is you are willing to offer to get and reach said goal. Now that you have that information in hand, you know what you want and you know what you're willing to give to get it. The next question is, what entity do you want to work with to get it? Now, some people enjoy working with angels. Some people enjoy working with demons. Some with spirits. And depending on who you are, like if you work with the Goetia, some people call those spirits, some people call them demons. To me, everything's just an entity. But some people also prefer to only work with gods. Now, you can make pacts with any of these entities. Honestly, angels, demons, and deities are the category I generally like to stick with, because pacting with spirits, like human spirits of the dead, I've not found there's much use in it. You don't get as much bang for your buck, if you know what I'm saying. So if you're going to do this, might as well go big or go home, you know? So that said, find the entity you want to work with, whether it be a deity or whatnot. So for example, if you're wanting to find a lover or just improve your sex life, you might look to the spirit Citri in the Goetia. Sex, magic, lust, those kinds of things, love. Some people might get questionable on the term love with Citri, but definitely improving your sex life is something he can do. So that would be an entity you could pact with, but short-term things like that I generally don't like to pact with, but some people may want to. So that would be an entity. Now let's say you're wanting success in a venture, like let's say you're a soldier and you want protection, you want strength, you want to be able to do your job good, and you want to be able to come home safe. Thor and Odin would be great deities to make a pact with for this. And they would definitely ramp up your odds of coming home safely. If you wanted to perhaps increase your physical beauty, or even your auric beauty or energetic beauty to make you more attractive, Aphrodite would be a great entity to make a pact with. If you're wanting to increase your magical power, your abilities as a sorcerer, many of the goddesses like Hecate or Lilith, goddesses that are very heavily associated with magic would be great entities to make a pact with. And when we're talking about learning and increasing magical prowess, both Odin and Freya would be really great in those aspects too. They're both heavily associated in magics and divinations, though their teachings will tend to lean far heavier into the Nordic traditions. So also consider that when you're picking your entities. Do your research. And don't just do your research and say, hey, I like this entity, that's the one I'm going to make a pact with. Honestly, when you are searching for that entity, choose an entity you've worked with. You've spent some time with them. You've meditated. You've done a few dedications. You've spoke with them in some way, whatever way your practice allows. And long before you ever seek to make the pact. Now, if you've worked with this entity for, I usually say up to 3 months before you consider a pact. Some people say a month. I would say a minimum of 3 months. That's my personal opinion in my practice. then you can start considering a pact with them. But the key point here is find an entity you work well with, you enjoy working with, and who has a specialty in achieving the goal that you are seeking to achieve. Now, once you have this, the next step is actually writing out the pact. And yes, you have to write it out. You need a physical pact. I've heard of ways that they're done energetically, but every time I've heard this talked about, the manifestations don't seem to hold as well. And the going theory is that having the pact both physical and spiritual is what helps the transition and it boosts the manifestation. So sit down, write up the pact, write up the terms, say, put your name on there. I offer up X to name of the entity for or in exchange for Y in the next however much time you're giving it. Now, like I said, if you're shooting for anything under 3 months, don't even bother with the pact. Just do a spell. So 3 months and up. And then below that, if it's a list, when it say in exchange for, I usually put the following below. And I will have bullet points of everything I'm asking for. And then at the bottom, you'll have your name and the entity's name. Now, you don't have to sign it with your name during the ritual. That can already be pre-signed. But the big kicker is when you are making a pact, you need to put some form of you into it, more than just energy. So most people, it's blood. They'll take a drop or two of blood, put it on their signature, and that's locking them in. And the entity is literally binding its essence to its signature or sigil. So you do have other options, however. You can use saliva. It is genetic material. And you can also use sexual fluids if you rather. So if you're queasy with blood, you do have other options. But something of that nature needs to be placed upon that signature. I usually go with blood, again, just because it's simpler. For me, a diabetic lance, it's a quick, just I'm done, moving on. So you need to actually have that pact wrote up in physical form. Then, once you have it fully wrote up, that's when you'd move on to the ritual to sign the pact. Now, this ritual is you contact the entity, you call the entity to you into the room, and you would read over the pact with the entity. Now, you should have hopefully discussed this with the entity beforehand, but you would read over the pact with the entity and ask the entity if the entity agrees to these terms or has any questions. If the entity agrees, you sign. If the entity has questions, you negotiate. It's a contract. Now, once it's signed and done, the ritual is over. Before you close the ritual, there's two directions you can go with this pact. Some people like to keep the physical pact. They fold it up, they seal it, and they keep it someplace safe but out of sight. That's actually the method I like to use because I do like to go back and speak with the entity on it. Though at the same time, when I seal it, I'll actually have a second copy that I can use to review with the entity, so that one that all that power was put into, it's sealed and put away, not disturbed until the completion of the pact. Other people, however, choose to burn the pact because it's releasing it from the physical into the ethereal to manifest everything that is going into it. It's releasing the energy so that it can manifest. Honestly, I found both ways work really, really well. With this one, I always tell my students, if you're going to make a pact, once you get to this stage, do the one that calls to you and feels right to you. That's going to be the road to go. At that point, the pact is done. You have your job to do or give whatever it is you promised, and the entity in question is set out to do and give you and teach you whatever it promised. It's kind of that simple. And never try to cheat them. Be honorable, be respectful, And they won't cheat you, they won't trick you, they'll be honorable and respectful with you. Now, do be cautious, because there are some entities like Loki. Though I have no issues working with Loki, I will not forget the fact that he is a trickster. So, if I make a pact with Loki, I know for a fact he will come through on his deal. And I ain't worried about how he's going to manifest it when I'm specific. Though at the same time, anytime you have a direct pact with an entity, they are very much in your life 24/7. So in the case of Loki or other trickster entities like him, you can expect more practical joke and a little fun, humorous chaos to take place around you during the pact. Just be cautious of little things like that. Also, if you work with an entity that has a sacred animal, that try to be nice to that animal during the pact. You might find some, if you're mean to like a dog while your pact is with, I believe Hecate likes dogs. Don't quote me on that, please, because I'm really iffy now that I said it. But just as an example, you might find yourself stubbing your toe, falling down, I don't know, spilling your coffee on you. You know, some form of minor misfortune because you were rude to dogs, and the entity likes dogs. So that kind of thing can happen. So always be aware that the entity's with you 24/7 for the duration of the pact. Now that said, why would you do a pact? Why not just do a spell? Well, honestly, it really boils down to long-term goals and accountability. First off, in long-term goals, it's really nice to know you have a partner to help work and achieve that goal. You're not going at it alone. And secondly, like I said, they're with you 24/7, and they're always there to be like, hey, don't you want to work on that project of ours? Or, hey, what about that? They're always there to remind you and hold you accountable. I know one friend, they did a pact for weight loss and actually powerlifting. They never could get to the commitment of the gym. They did a pact, and the entity they worked with stayed on them the whole time, encouraged them, got them, made sure they would wake up whether the alarm went off or not. Motivated them to go to the gym, motivated them to work out, actually gave them workout tips, even helped them with hunger cravings. Like all their cravings for sugars and unhealthy crap just went away, and they just started eating better without even thinking about it. So these are things that pacts can help, that where spells tend to be a little more short term or sometimes a little more subtle. A pact can just give you a lot more oomph and give you that real bang for your buck that you need should you want to do it. And again, like I said, pacts are not necessary. As a magical practitioner, you can work your entire career and life without ever making a pact. And if anyone approaches you and says, if you wish to work with this entity, you have to make a pact with it, turn and walk away. Don't listen to them. That's not the case. Working with an entity and doing your daily devotions and prayers is drastically different than a pact. For example, I've worked with Hell for years, and that's Hell, Hel. I've never done a pact with her, ever. Not once, not ever. And she's never asked me to. It's never come up. I've done invocation work with her. I've done evocation work with her. I even have done possession work with her. But at no point have I ever made a pact with her. And I've never had need. Pact work is something I do not do often. I keep it in reserve. It's a tool in my toolbox. But they've all come out extremely successful with absolutely wonderful results. And if this is something you're interested in, give it a try, look into it, do your research. But yeah, it can be a wonderful thing to add to your practice if you want to. But it is not required. And I'm sorry if I've sounded like I'm beating a dead horse here. It's just, I have seen people try to tell people it's required. And it's not. There's a difference between devotion to an entity and showing your respects and lighting a candle or prayer to them and making a pact. So pact work it's a different thing because it is a tit for tat. There's a trade, and you are held to that contract just as they are. Just as your bill collectors will hold you to your contract when you sign a loan. Anyways, with that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you learned a lot from it. And I do encourage you, if you are interested in pacts, by all means give it a try. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you have any questions, drop us a comment or even just say hi. It helps the channel out a lot. Let us know how we're doing. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification icon so that you'll be alerted anytime we have new videos coming. We're releasing 2 videos a week right now. Both are normal videos as well as our current Urban Magic and Kitchen Witch series. And we also now have a podcast on Twitch. I'll drop the link below. Join us Saturdays for the Magical Coffee Hour at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anyways, I'm Drake, and this has been Working Dragon Mystic. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.